Hey guys, what is going on? Inception here and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be discussing what are the best work rates to have in each position. Now, this is very subjective to a person's play style. This is very subjective to the formation that they're using and all that kind of stuff. I'll tell you guys the very generic answers that people usually give you, but for some people, they don't really know what the generic answers actually are. So, the way that this team is set up right now, ignore how it is, right? So this is a team that I have just from basically untradables, right? The only players that have been bought, because my cousin sometimes plays on this account, because I never really use this actual team. I usually play drafts. He bought De Gea by Sergio Ramos and Jordi Alba. Everybody else is untradeable. They're from the icons that I packed and so on and so forth. So in regards to this team, right? The very typical is we're going to start off with the goalkeeper. Goalkeepers have no work rates. It's more just about what types of goalies are good, and I always tell people it's Farman and De Gea. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage by getting other goalkeepers. You can for the fun aspect, but you're kind of missing out on being able to do those specific saves, right? So let's start off with the fullbacks and the center backs. So with the fullbacks, it really depends on how you want to play. So let's just say, for instance, you're using Zanetti. So this is a left back Zanetti. He's just there because my cousin uses this team. So let's just say you're using a Zanetti as a right back, right? This Zanetti has high work rates. High work rates are beautiful to have. They're one of the most ideal work rates you can possibly have. The reason being, right, is because you're not linear to a specific game style because of the fullback that you have. So if you're using someone like Javier Zanetti, right, Zanetti can either attack for you or either defend for you, depending on what instructions you want to put on him. So let's just say, for instance, you're going to put stay back while attacking on your Javier Zanetti. He will do that more often than actually pushing up. But you have to be careful, right? Because the tactics and the instructions, they go hand in hand with each other. So if you look at your custom tactics and you have your passing, higher, you have your crossing to be like in the 45s and 50s, so the guys can actually go inside the box. What this will do, right, is that it'll create this thing where your fullbacks, with freeform, by the way, your fullbacks will make those overlapping runs if he's not on stay back while attacking. Because he's on stay back while attacking, it's more ideal to keep the passing a little bit lower and the crossing to be a little bit lower as well. Because if you want him to stay back while attacking more often than not, you want him to be unorganized. But freeform will still make him stay back while attacking. Again, it's very tough to explain because they all go hand in hand with each other, right? So if you have freeform, there is a chance that even though a Javier Zanetti has high work rates and you tell him to stay back while attacking, there's a chance that he might push forward. The reason being is because he does still have high attacking work rates in general, right? He's not medium high, he's high. So if you want him to play more to the instruction that you're using, you have to decrease the passing, you have to change it to organize so that he doesn't push up all the time, right? He will sometimes if you do it yourself, but for the most part, someone who is high work rates that has stay back while attacking, that has a little bit of lower passing and a little bit of lower crossing, so the players will go inside the box because they expect this run to be made from the fullback, then they won't do it as often. Now let's just say, for instance, you tell your fullback to always overlap, right? Again, high work rates is very nice to have because if you tell them to always overlap, there's actually a better balance of telling a high work rate player to always overlap than to not overlap at all, because if they attack, they actually aggressively come back because of the fact that they have high defensive work rates. So that's very nice to have for someone who actually wants to be able to exploit the sides a little bit more with your fullbacks, right? So that's what the always overlap will do. But again, you have to be careful because your custom tactics go hand in hand with it. So if you want your fullback to actually make those overlapping runs, you would have to increase your passing and then you would have to put freeform so that, if the player pushes up, another player occupies that spot essentially, right? So if Zanetti pushes up, then someone else will play like a three at the back formation essentially, right? So if both your fullbacks are pushing up, then you're left a little bit vulnerable at the back. You might have only two center backs, but if only one of your fullbacks push up, right, depending on how you're attacking, you'll have three defenders remaining at the back, but they'll all act like center backs. One will play directly in the middle, and then the other two will play somewhat to the left side and then somewhat to the right side. So they'll still play very central base. They won't push out wide because of whatever your team width is. If your team width is wide, then yes, your center back would be by himself in the middle, and then your other two center backs will be a little bit more wide. So in regards to high work rates, you're more prone to doing whatever you want, right? You can play whatever game style you want. Is it the best work rate? Yes. But do all of the best fullbacks in the game have that work rate? No. So there's also fullbacks that have high medium. High medium is, again, still a very good work rate. And you can still work it around it so he actually stays back more than he pushes up, depending on the tactics and instructions they use. So someone like Jordi Alba is high medium. But Jordi Alba is one of the best fullbacks in the game. Reason being is because he has incredible pace. And he has decent aggression, right? So 77 aggression with 93 acceleration, 93 sprint speed with decent defensive stats and decent dribbling stats will make him aggressively try to get the ball back. And that's always a very nice feature to have on your players, right? So definitely ideal to have someone like Jordi Alba. High medium, you'll notice that even if you tell your player to stay back while attacking, he will still push up a little bit and he will still attack sometimes. Again, this very, very much depends on the tactics and instructions you have. So you have to kind of find that balance between having a player push up and not having a player push up. There's also examples with players that you can get as fullbacks that are medium high. If you get a fullback that is medium high in work rates, you're kind of working around a more defensive style of play, because if you have medium high and you tell him to stay back while attacking, he will really stay back while attacking. Again, depending on the tactics and instructions you use, but there's always this balance between each other, right? So if you have a medium high set left back, which I think there's actually, if I remember correctly, there's like 2 or 3 fullbacks that are actually decent to our medium high in the game, and they would definitely be okay to use, right? The other instruction, the other tactics that they have is high-low, so that's Dani Alves. If you're using someone like Dani Alves in your team, it's more based off of the fact that you are trying to attack your opposition, right? You're trying to push up, because high-low work rates is a very dangerous work rate to have, because you're always going to be vulnerable on that side, even if you tell your player to stay back while attacking with the right tactics, because it's like a characteristic of a player to be out of position, and Dani Alves will be out of position. But if you control him to come back, then his pace, at least with the Team of the Year card, would be very nice to come back all the way back into the play. The reason why a Team of the Year Dani Alves would be worth the attacking presence, if you really need that side to open up a little bit more, the Team of the Year version of Dani Alves' card is a very, very good attacker, considering all the stats together, right? So for someone like Dani Alves, he's basically good at everything. The 66 strength part is not a big issue because his dribbling is so good and his aggression is so good, right? So as a defender, this card's going to move really well. Finishing-wise, being 66 for a fullback isn't that bad also. You could, if you really wanted to, give him a hunter card so you can really focus on the fact that you want him to be able to actually put the ball into the back of the net. So again, the card's incredible to get if you're focusing around someone who's actually going to be attacking. But remember, he does have high-low work rates, so you have to be very careful with a card like Dani Alves. Is he fantastic to use in the game? Yes, he moves around the pitch really, really nicely. And if you're an aggressive attacker and you have your fullbacks unbalanced or always overlapping, Dani Alves is going to be incredible to have. And that leads to the next thing, balanced work rates. So balanced work rates, what they do, in terms of attacking runs, if you keep them on balanced attack, it'll basically make them play more to the characteristic of the player, right? So let's just say, for instance, you have someone like Zanetti who's high work rates. He will sometimes attack and he will sometimes defend, especially if your custom tactics is basically around this kind of area, like 50s across the shooting, the passing, and then like a 40, like around the 40 in the crossing. He will really play down to his work rates, essentially, right? So with Zanetti's card, high work rates, he'll play more to his work rates. If you have a high-medium fullback, he will attack a little bit more than he will defend. So sometimes having the players on balance is actually pretty decent because of the way that they move around the pitch, attacking and defending-wise, right? I don't think there are low-high work-rated fullbacks, but if you have low-high, you don't even want him to remotely push up top, not even a little bit, right? You want to be able to basically control whatever you can control in your team with either high-medium, high-high, or medium-high. The best players who are fullbacks in the games are usually like high or high medium, but sometimes I'll come across someone who's medium high that could be decent to use. Now we'll move on to the center backs. So the center backs is, again, with all the positions, it's really down to what your play style is. So there's certain instructions that you can actually put on your center backs that will make them an aggressive defender, right? So if you have someone like Sergio Ramos, right, who is high medium center back tend to be more aggressive, pushing a little bit higher because they want to attack more. That pushes them higher up the pitch, right? So if you have someone like Sergio Ramos, he's going to aggressively intercept the ball for you quite a bit if you have your custom tactics to be set somewhat like this. So if you have like 72 pressure, 66 aggression, if someone wants to make the pass from around their 18-yard box, right, or just above their 18-yard box, or maybe like 3/4 away from their 18-yard box, and they want to pass the ball off to someone in the middle, Sergio Ramos is a type of player that will get in front of the attacker and get the ball back, right? So Sergio Ramos is a great player, but it really depends on the type of player you want as a center back. So because he's very aggressive, you have to be very careful with how you as the player defend against someone else, right? Because if you tell him to stay back while attacking, he will do that, but he will also be higher up the pitch because he wants to be more of an aggressive attacker, or he wants to aggressively get the ball back. There's actually an instruction in this game from the interception. So there's aggressive interceptions and then there's conservative interceptions. So the thing that Sergio Ramos does is that it is a characteristic of his to aggressively intercept the ball, because when you have it on normal interceptions, it'll play more to the characteristics of a player than it is the instruction that you have. So if I have him on stay back while attacking, but then I also tell him to be aggressive in the interceptions, he's going to do that more frequently. Now, that's a chance that you have to be willing to take in your own team. If you do that, right, Sergio Ramos will be caught out of position more often than not, unless you are a very good defender, because if you can defend really well, you can actually control the aggressiveness with the players. And it's actually nice when you have high pressure defenders in general, because that's the AI doing that for you, unless you have to switch to them for that split second so you can make the decisions of whether or not you want to aggressively intercept or don't want to aggressively intercept. It is a characteristic of Sergio Ramos to aggressively intercept, but you can make him do it more often than he already does with his high-medium work rates by actually giving him aggressive interceptions, right? Normally when I play FIFA, I like to keep it on stay back while attacking and normal interceptions, but if I feel like I really and truly need the ball back in those last dying moments, it's very ideal to put both your center backs to aggressively get that ball back in those last few minutes where you're down a goal, you're 2-1 and you need that goal back, right? If you need that goal back, it's ideal to tell them to aggressively intercept the ball so that you're putting this high pressure situation on your opponent and he doesn't really have that much time to think. Other center backs that center backs usually have, or other work rates that center backs usually have, is something like medium. So a good center back that has medium work rates is someone like Jerome Boateng, right? So if we look at Jerome Boateng's card, he has medium work rates. Now, medium work rates is an interesting work rate to have. And for me personally, it's not necessarily ideal for me to have, but some of the players have this as a work rate and they play really well. So what medium will do is that it'll position them not necessarily too far back, but not necessarily too high up. So they won't be as high as Sergio Ramos, but they won't be as low as Eric Bailly. So he'll kind of be in a very balanced position, right? In terms of kind of being up but not being up if you tell him to be on normal interceptions, right? So medium is a pretty decent balance to have for someone, like let's just say for instance, I have Sergio Ramos on the team and then I put Boateng in the team. There's actually this very nice balance of having someone who's a little bit farther back, but then having that one center back that kind of pushes forward, because what happens is that your fullbacks kind of turn into a little bit of center backs because of your team width. So if your team width is a little bit more narrow, like 45 is somewhat narrow, your fullbacks start to turn into kind of like center backs a little bit, but because they're so fast, if someone wants to make those passes to the sides, they can push out to the sides, and your player with medium work rates, or even Sergio Ramos, because medium defensive work rates doesn't mean low defensive work rates, he will still come back into position and block the area that he's supposed to be in, because you do have the instruction of stay back while attacking on him. But medium work rates is nice to have. I have used Boateng quite a lot in this FIFA. I used him with Alaba and Vidal sometimes, or even with Tolisso in the team. So they work out really well with each other, right? With Alaba being high medium and then Boateng being medium, there's a nice balance there, right? Of having your fullback somewhat attack and having a player who can actually pass the ball quite well. I don't know if you guys have seen his passing stats, but he does have 75 short passing and 80 long passing, which is very nice to have for a center back if you want to pass it out to the sides, right? So medium is another ideal work rates. The next ideal work rates is medium high. So medium high, I would say personally, is probably the most ideal work rate for anybody to have, right? Because I think that with defending AI being really effective nowadays, it's very ideal to have someone who's medium high so that they're always in that general area to be able to block the ball. Because with players like Eric Bailly, they're normally not really caught out of position. But again, then you miss out that factor of being able to put high pressure against your opponent. And some people just don't do well against high pressure opposition. So you are missing that with a medium high center back. But you can still ask them to be on aggressive interceptions. And with the tactics that I'm using, where my aggression and my pressure is high, he will still play pretty high up the pitch, but he will still somewhat play to the work rates that he has. So medium high is probably the most ideal work rates to have, but it's not the only one that works. If you guys have a team of the year Sergio Ramos in your team, that guy's an absolute monster, because if you look at his regular card, right, he has 79 agility while also having 75 acceleration and 77 sprint speed. That makes it so that he can move left and right really nicely with 84 aggression and really good defending stats and physical stats in general. Sergio Ramos as a center back is probably one of the most ideal center backs to have, right? He's fantastic in the air. He's fantastic on the floor. He's just a very good player to have. Probably the best center back in the game, which kind of makes sense because in real life he's considered the best center back. So it kind of makes sense, right? The other work rate that you can get is low-high. So players that usually have low-high is usually like the Italian dudes, right? Like if you look at Chiellini's card, Chiellini has low-high work rates, right? So if we look at his card, he has right over here low-high. So because he's low-high, he is very, very conservative in the interceptions. He absorbs pressure. He doesn't push oppositions. The problem with having low-high, and I'll tell you guys what it is right now, the problem with having low-high is that I've noticed that it's easier for people to pop in those long shots. And if you're playing foot champs, right, like I said, that trait of shooting and finesse shot is very, very ideal to have, because if you have that trait, they take those shots really effectively, and if no one's putting pressure on those players, then they're going to be able to take the shot a little bit more easier, right? So you have to be careful with using players that are low-high, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the low-high players are bad, because I've used a Chiellini before, and he was fun to use. He's not necessarily ideal because his acceleration is a little bit low, but he was a fun player to use whenever I did use him. I also use, I believe, Barzagli, and I think he's also low-high work rates. He feels like he's low-high in game. He is low-high in game. Sometimes when you play FIFA enough, you kind of realize what the work rates actually mean in the game. Like you can kind of feel how far they push up, how far they push back, right? But people need to understand that your instructions of stay back while attacking and normal interceptions, they will play more to the characteristics of the player. Now, if you want him to be more conservative, like if you don't want Sergio Ramos to push up like a maniac, telling him to be on conservative interception, will make him kind of play more like a medium, more than he is a high medium, right? It'll make him play a little bit more medium high, but he will still, or medium, but because his characteristics is to be aggressive and I have the pressure and aggression to be high, then he's still going to aggressively defend. Now, if you tell him to be on conservative interceptions, right, and then you put your pressure lower, like in the 43s, and you have him in the 42s, then yes, if you tell him to be on conservative interceptions, he will play more to the instructions and the custom tactics that you have set on him, more than he will play to his characteristics of being an aggressive defender. So that's the nice thing about custom tactics and instructions. The only problem, right, is that when you do that with your defensive line, you're not only affecting that one player, but you're affecting everybody else. So the passing runs, just in general, like you have to understand that If you have your pressure and your aggression high, that also means that you can attack with more force because your defenders are closer to your midfielders, so you can make those quicker passes a little bit easier, right? But if you have your aggression and pressure a little bit lower, then it takes a little bit more time to build up the play, depending again on what your speed and your passing is. So just take that into mind when you're using players like Sergio Ramos, Eric Bailly, Boateng, that your custom tactics and your instructions has absolutely a huge influence on how your players play in this game. So just be very careful with that. Most of the times with the chemistry styles that I use on the players is Shadow as a center back, and I'll probably make a separate video on what I think is the best chemistry styles for each player. On whether or not it's a mannerism or actual stat increases, we'll look into that further, probably into another video. But most of the times for the center backs, I tell them to be on Shadow because someone like Sergio Ramos and Eric Bailly, they already have very good physical stats. So because they have good physical stats, there's no need for me to give them extra physical stats when I can make the defensive AI aspect of these cards a little bit better. So let's move on to the midfielders now. So the midfielders in general, the reason why I chose this formation is because it has all the narrow-based positions, but we'll also get into the left mids, the right mids, the left wings, the right wings, right forwards, left forwards, so on and so forth, right? So we're going to start off with the CDMs. Now, we're going to take these guys out for now, right? Because these guys aren't ideal. This is just, the team that my cousin uses whenever he plays on this account, right? So let's just look at people who are ideal to have as CDMs. As you guys know, the cheap option to get is a Bakayoko. He has plenty of problems with him, but for a center defensive mid to use in the beginning of the game, he's going to be ideal. So the first thing we're going to look at is the work rates, because the work rates is single-handedly the most important thing about your CDMs, right? Now, for me personally, I cannot live without a CDM that's medium high. That being said, sometimes you got to do the best under the circumstances that you're in, right? So sometimes it's not possible to get a medium high, but it's the most ideal because a CDM is the main focal point, right, of your team. Medium high would make them stay back while attacking more often than they will push forward, which is the most ideal thing to have, because when you defend in this game, it's all about having your midfield to be organized and then having your defenders to stay in the positions that they're supposed to. But it's all about defending with the midfield first, and then if you truly and really need to, then you switch to the back four. Someone like Bakayoko with medium work rates will suggest that he will attack a few times, even if you tell him to stay back while attacking, and he does do that. He has 73 pace, so it doesn't make up for the fact of him coming back, right? So it can present to be a problem. But we're going to be looking at the work rates. Medium work rates is not terrible to have as a CDM, because most of the times when you're getting center mids in general, most of them are high, medium, high. You would be lucky to get a good high and a good high. Not lucky. You would be in a better position to get players who are high or high medium that actually have very good stats. So with Bakayoko, he's one of the most ideal CDMs. Medium work rates is okay. So what this will do, right, with the instructions that we have, and you got to be careful with this, right? So this is where the free form of custom tactics kind of plays a huge part, right? If you tell your custom tactics to be on freeform, the top part of your attack you're going to like way more, but the middle to bottom half is going to be a little bit more questionable. So just because he has stay back while attacking doesn't mean that he won't push up. At times, he will push out of his position because of the medium work rates, and when he does push out of position, it leaves you more vulnerable at the back. Again, you defend with your midfield, so when your midfielders are nowhere to be found, try your best to bring them back, and if you can't, then you have to use the back four, right? But you don't want to put yourself in that position. So most of the times, the instructions I have for my CDMs is to stay back while attacking. There are a few options with the instructions with defensive behavior, which is cut passing lanes and man mark. Someone like Bakayoko with medium work rates will actually do that somewhat effectively, right? So whatever defensive behavior you want him to do, he will do it really well, right? So with man marking, you have to be very careful with that, because if we look at Bakayoko's specific stats, he has 80 marking, right? So 80 marking will make that instruction of his actually work out at a somewhat decent level, because he will mark an area of where a player is. The problem with man marking at times is that you have to kind of figure out what you want with your team, because man marking will make him position himself in a different area, right? So he'll always be positioned to mark a man, essentially, right? That also means that he may not be playing in that general area that he's supposed to be in. So you have to be very careful when you man mark, right? Man mark could be ideal depending on the person you're playing against, but most of the times it's not ideal. Most of the times people are using CDMs, they'll use cut passing lanes, because cut passing lanes is the most ideal to use for a CDM if he has very good defensive stats, because cut passing lanes plays a huge part. If someone who has very good interceptions and very good aggressions, it'll play a good role. So someone like Bakayoko will play the role decently because his aggression and his interceptions and his marking is very decent. So he'll be able to play that role of being an aggressive interception getter, or a pass blocker, or a lane blocker, or whatever you want to call it, to be good in that general area, right? Now, again, you want, to the best of your ability, to get a medium high. The most ideal player to get in FIFA is Patrick Vieira, right? Because if you look at Patrick Vieira's card, no one touches this card in terms of being the best CDM in the game, because he has everything in his locker except for the weak foot. The weak foot would definitely be very nice to have, but if you're playing a Patrick Vieira off to the right center defensive mid side, someone who is medium high work rates, 6'4" foot tall, with 81 jumping, 83 heading accuracy, so he'll win the ball in the air like crazy for you, right? 95 interceptions, 85 marking, 95 sliding tackle, and 87 slide tackle. A card like this, you can ask him to do whatever you want him to do, and he will do it to the best of its potential, right? No one really matches this card, right? His agility and balance is great, considering his acceleration and sprint speed is fantastic, so he's going to move left and right very smoothly. Just the most ideal CDM to use. You could get someone like Conte, who's also medium high, but the height could be a huge factor in affecting the way that you defend in that general area, which we'll look at right now. Conte is actually one of the most ideal CDMs to use if you want him to be the type of CDM that actually cuts the passing lanes. Because if we look at Conte's card, he's all about interceptions and aggression like he is in real life, right? So because that's his characteristic in real life, EA have implemented that in the game. He's going to do that instruction, if you tell him to stay back while attacking and cut the passing lanes, to the best of its ability, right? He will do it very, very well. Although he is kind of small, so because he's small, it is probably the best instruction that you can possibly give him. It's the one that you want to give him to play to his full potential. So be careful with the work rates in the instructions that you give certain players, because everyone plays to their own characteristic, right? So because Conte is a very aggressive interceptor and he works hard around the pitch, he's going to do those instructions to the best of its ability. He's going to do it way better than Bakayoko. You can tell Bakayoko to do the same thing, but he won't do it as good as Conte, because Conte is in the low 90s, whereas Bakayoko is in the low 80s. So there's definitely going to be a difference there. Now, this is another question that people ask. Is it terrible to have a high-medium work-rated player playing as a CDM? And the answer to that question is no, it's not terrible at all. But it really depends on the player that you get. For me personally, the most ideal center defensive mid that you can get in the game, and again, I know that people don't like me doing this, but if you're looking at it in the perfect perspective, Hullet is the most ideal player to use in that position. We'll even go to his second last version of his card, right? If we look at Hullet's card, Hullet is a high-medium work-rated player, but let's look at his stats, right? 5-star weak foot, 4-star skill moves, 88 pace. 88 pace is very, very important with 84 aggression, right? So he will push back on defense even with those high medium work rates, because he's going to be a hard worker to push back. If you tell him to stay back while attacking, he will still somewhat push up the pitch, but he will also be a very aggressive defender because of his work rates. He'll play somewhat similar to someone like Sergio Ramos. So this can be a good thing or a bad thing. The bad thing is that if you don't defend properly and Hullet is caught out of position, you only have one CDM to work with. And if you only have one CDM to work with, he's going to move around the pitch a little bit oddly if you're playing him in a 4-2-3-1, because you're playing him as a right center defensive mid, but now he has to kind of occupy a space, and then it kind of confuses the players in game because now they think, okay, which area am I going to occupy? And again, this really depends on the custom tactics that you use. If your gameplay is more oriented around being a more defensively sound player, you want to keep your team unorganized, because if you keep them unorganized, defensively, they'll be better positioned, right? They'll be better positioned, but again, really depends on your gameplay, because if you tell your fullbacks to always overlap, it's actually nice to have them on freeform because they do that more often, and then you'll have your CDMs occupy the space of the fullback. So you won't necessarily have a solid midfield coming back to defending it for you when you're aggressively attacking, but that's the risk that you take by having your fullbacks always overlapping. So again, Hullit's one of the most ideal players to have because he has decent defensive stats. It would be obviously the most ideal thing to do by giving him a shadow card so that you actually increase his pace and his defending, because everything else is fantastic, right? And I'm not sure what his traits are because they don't show it in this game. You have to check the external websites, but look at the traits of the players to see what else will help you, because there's one thing about Hullit's card, and I'll get into it afterwards, in terms of a 4-2-3-1 with the cams, that is actually ideal. The other work rates that you can possibly have is low-high. Sometimes people actually put center backs as their CDMs. The problem with putting a center back in a CDM area is that they feel like a center back playing in a CDM area. It's nice to have a CDM that actually feels like a midfielder. When they don't play similar to a midfielder, that's when the problem presents itself. Other cheap options you can have as a CDM, you can get your typical high work rated players, right? So if you get someone like Arturo Vidal, which we'll look into right now, he's actually a decent player too. For me, he's a hit or miss, right? There's certain games I like him, certain games I don't. I don't like inconsistency, so for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of the card. But is he a good CDM to use? Yes, because if we look at his actual stats, he may not have crazy good height, like 6'2", 6'4", or whatever, like Hullet and Patrick Vieira has, but 5'11" is very decent to have with high work rates and a 4-star weak foot, right? He does also have 82 jumping with 81 heading accuracy, which is going to help you when he's in the air jumping for the ball. He does have some decent physical capabilities with 93 aggression and 85 interceptions, right? So he's going to be an aggressive type defender. So again, if you tell him to stay back while attacking and cut the passing lanes, he will do a very good job of that because there's a good balance between the interceptions and the aggressions, right? He does also have the stamina, so if you tell him to stay back while attacking, he does still have high attacking work rates, so he will push up the pitch from time to time. If we actually look at his in-game stats, his finishing isn't actually terrible. It's more ideal to give your CDM shadow so that, you know, they can be the best they could possibly they can possibly be defensively. But if you want to have your CDM to have that extra attacking presence pushing up the pitch like some pro players actually do, then giving him a hunter will probably be more ideal, because I'm pretty sure that Vidal actually has the long shot trait, so he would be very good at shooting either with his weak foot or his strong foot in general. So definitely look into a card like Vidal if you're looking into that. I've used players like Tolisso as a CDM, and it's very noticeable that he's high medium work rates, right? It's incredibly noticeable. If we look at Tolisso's card, right, I've gotten his inform versions of his card, and if you look at the card, it makes sense, right? He has all of his stats to be around the 80s, which is the most ideal thing to have for someone who's going to be playing as a CDM for you. The problem with Tolisso's card is that because he is high medium, he doesn't track back on the defensive front fast enough because his sprint speed is so low. 70 sprint speed is not ideal to have, and this is my problem with Bakayoko because he's not the fastest to come back into play with a medium work rates, right? 76 pace is okay, his acceleration is great, so the acceleration aspect is fantastic because if he is in position, you can move left and right with him very smoothly, but if someone passes him, he won't catch up to them with that sprint speed. But the aggression will help a little bit for him to kind of forcefully try to get the ball back. So very, very situational. You want to have CDMs that are actually good in the air as well. If we look at Bakayoko's card, he does have 78 jumping while also being 6'1", so he will win the ball in the air sometimes in the middle, and that is the most ideal thing to have. If you're using someone like Conte, Conte's regular cards, or even if he has an inform, I don't think he has an inform, but even if he does have an inform, are not ideal to have if you want to be able to win the ball in the air, right? So medium is good, medium high is most ideal, high medium is okay depending on the players that you get, and high is okay if you want to have this decent balance of being able to attack and defend really nicely. So the next position that we have is the cam spot. So the cam spot is, again, very situational to the players. So if we look at the cam spot, right now we have someone like Haji who's medium low. Medium low is not terrible to have. So we're going to look at Haji's card for now, right? So this is, for me, not an ideal card foot champs wise, but it's still a fun enough card to use where he's at a decent level, right? So Haji's card is medium low. Medium low is not terrible to have playing in a 4-2-3-1 or in a 4-1-2-2 bracket 2, playing as your central cam, because the main focal point of the attacking presence that you have is the cam spot, right? The middle cam spot. So when you have that player in that position, it's all about creating the space, opening up the space, taking shots if your attackers are occupied, right? Your cam is very important. A lot of the times, you actually score more goals with your cams than you do with your strikers, depending on the situation of the game, right? So with someone like Haji, medium low is not terrible to have because he's not aggressively going to push up too much, but he's also not aggressively going to come back that much. So he'll remain as that attacking presence up there, right? So medium low is okay to have, right? So most cams, if you're starting off in a 4-3-2-1 and you're switching your left forward or your right forward to a cam spot, most of them will have high work rates or mostly high medium work rates. So let's just say, for instance, you want to put someone like let's just say Marez, for instance, right? If you want to put Marez as a central cam, Marez is medium work rates. Medium work rates is also a very good work rate to have for a central cam. The side cams, very debatable depending on what type of game style you want to play. But as a central cam, there's going to be a very good balance of him pushing up really nicely with his two cams and coming back and being able to defend at a decent rate with Patrick Vieira or Bakayoko playing in the defensive front, right? So, or defensive backside. So someone like Marez will play that role really well because of his work rates. He's also a fantastic card to use in the game. If you look at his stats, there's not really much wrong with this card, except for maybe the long shots area and the fact that his sprint speed isn't high up. But that's okay because he's your central cam, right? And his strength isn't the greatest either because he's also 5'10" with the lack of strength. But really fun card to use with the 5-star skill moves, right? So that's an ideal card to use as a cam. Is he ideal to use on the cam spot up top or to the right or to the left side or to the right side? That's debatable, right? So again, really depends on your game style. So let's just say, for instance, you're putting Marez as your left cam, right? If you're putting Marez as your left cam and he has medium work rates and you tell him to be on balanced instructions, right? So you don't tell him to do anything, he just sticks to his position. He's going to play more to his characteristics. So he's going to be more attacking oriented than he's going to be more defensive oriented. If we look at Marez's card, and I'm actually going to pull up Foothead here to see if he has any traits that will help him a little bit, because traits is very important, and that's something I didn't mention a lot in this video, but traits is something that you have to look at to see what the player has to offer more than the stats that he has, right? So with Marez's traits, he has shooting and finesse shot. So that's fantastic to have, right? If you're actually playing him on the right cam spot, because if you're playing with Marez and you want to cut inside with him and take that really good finesse shot, he's going to do a very good job at doing that. So if you tell him, right, let's just say his instructions is to stay on the edge of the box for the cross and you have him on free roam, right? If you do that, you'll put him in a better position to be able to take those really good shots. Now there's the other thing, right, where his other trait is long shots, and shooting, right? So that's the two traits together. Because he has those two traits together with medium work rates, it's actually very nice to have. So again, if you tell him to play the role of someone who is going to stay on the edge of the box, his long shots is an actual trait that he has. If we look at his specific stats, he does have 78 long shots. So you have to be careful. And this is the thing that I explained in the traits video if you guys haven't seen either. Some players have the traits, but they don't have the stats that make up for the traits. So if you give him a hunter card, his long shots will be improved by a little bit, but not significantly. But because he has that trait, the way that he takes a long shot is going to be a little bit better. But because his shot power is 83, it'll help a little bit in the long shot department for him to take them more consistently. But his finesse shots are going to be more ideal to do than his long shots. But look at the traits when you're looking at these players. Technical dribbler with the LTRT dribbling will also help out, right? With the medium work rate or medium work rates, you can ask him to do whatever you want him to do. If you want him to be an aggressive attacker, you tell him to get into the box for the cross, because when you push out to the sides in general, most players will get into the box for the cross. But it's not necessarily for the cross, it's more for being able to win the header or being able to win the driven pass on the floor. So if we look at Marez, small player, very oriented around dribbling and quick movement, right? That's what type of player he is. Next player we have is someone like Gabriel Azuz, if you have a high work rated player. For me personally, I love having high work rated players on the attacking and defensive side because it gives you this good balance, because I'm more of a defensive oriented player than I am an attacking oriented player. So it's more ideal for me to have someone like Gabriel Azuz who comes back defensively, even if I tell his instructions just to be on balance, right? So sometimes he'll attack and sometimes he'll defend. So there'll be a very good balance with his card, right? With high, very similar to medium, but more effective, right? Because it's high, he will really do the instructions and tactics that you have more often than someone who is a medium. That's why, like I said earlier, it's more ideal to have someone who is medium playing as a central cam than it is to have him playing on the left or the right cam spot. Some players have medium low, and medium low is actually very nice to have. A very good example of a player that's nice to have as a left or right cam is someone like Messi, because if you look at Messi's card, right, we're going to look at his work rates. So Messi's work rates are medium. So medium on the sides is going to play very similar to Marez, but better than Marez, right? Because if you put Messi off to the right side, he'll be able to shoot with his weak foot, although I don't think it's a 4-star weak foot. I think it's more like a 3.5-star or a 3-star weak foot. He will still be able to take decent shots with his weak foot across body if you need to do the driven shot. But the thing that he's going to be most effective at doing is cutting inside the pitch and being able to take that finesse shot, long shot, because that's an actual trait that he has. Very similar to someone like Marez, right? So medium work rates with Messi, again, very ideal to use if you use him as a central cam. It would be even better than using him as a right cam, because he does have the long shot taker as well, so he's going to be a very good player to have in the middle or on the sides. The next work rates is basically high-medium. So high-medium for the left and the right cam will make them very aggressive type of attackers, but if you tell them to stay in the edge of the box, it'll actually create a very good balance if you're not aggressively pushing into the box to be able to lay off a pass on the side. So again, really depends on the play style that you want to play. So we're not going to get to the strikers just yet, because we also have the other positions, which is the 4-3-3 and the 4-3-2-1 with the left wings and right wings. So left wings and right wings, the most ideal work rates for them would be high-medium, high-high, medium-high, depending on your play style. Again, and I'm sorry that I keep repeating myself, but it's a very important part of your gameplay. So depending on your play style, most people use high-medium wingers. The reason being is because they want them to be able to attack the sides really effectively. If you have high work rated players, it actually gives you more of an option, right, to tell them to come back on defense. With that high work rate, they will do that more often than not. Sometimes I like using Gabriel Azuz off on the sides, simply because of the fact that he has high work rates, to be able to create this extra support on the sides, because a center mid is not a right mid, it's a center mid, right? So if I push a center mid out of position, it creates this space on the side. So if I tell my right wing and my left wing to come back in defense, I'll be able to block that general area on the side. But then I'll also be lacking an attacking presence if I want to catch the guy out on the counter attack, right? So again, really depends on the instructions. So with high work rates, you have the freedom of doing whatever you want with your player, right? So if you want him to come back in defense, he'll do that. If you want him to cut inside and get in behind, he'll do that very effectively because of the high attacking work rates. Someone like Marez with medium work rates will also do that as well, but not as effectively as someone who is high in the work rates department, right? Because the thing about telling your players to cut inside and get in behind is that it's very situational to the opponent that you're placing, because sometimes it's actually better to keep your player unbalanced, because what that does, right, is that you can create this passing opportunity in the middle and then lay off to the ball on the sides if you want to create that extra attacking space, or that you want to make that extra pass to give yourself more of an attacking opportunity. Because as you guys know, the fullbacks kind of start to push into the middle when someone's trying to put a lot of pressure onto you, and having a left wing and a right wing with good work rates and good instructions, having them on the sides to be able to finish the opportunities and lay off that extra ball to them is very nice to have. I think it's also very similar with the 4-3-2-1, where your left forwards and right forwards really depends on the instructions that you give them. So the attacking runs, you could tell them to drift wide, play central, target man. You know, they have basically a striker's instructions, right? So if you want them to stay wide and somewhat play like a 4-3-3, but not so much where they're not in the middle as often, because you can push them out wide, right? But they'll still initially be in the center forward or left forward area, right? So definitely ideal to have. So high work rates, high medium work rates, high low work rates, if you want to be super aggressive, are the most ideal to use for players on the sides, whether they're a right forward, left wing, right wing, and so on and so forth. But the left mid and the right mid situation is very different, because if we look at the left mid and right mid situation, for me personally, I don't like using players like Messi or Marez on the sides. I feel like they're completely unusable, but that's my opinion, obviously. I actually prefer to use players like Gabriel Azuz and Heung-min Son on the left mid and right mid spot, because I tell my left mid and right mid to come back in defense to give me that extra defensive presence. And this formation, while also having your left mid and right mid coming back, is very solid defensively, right? But doesn't really offer you that much attacking wise. So sometimes if your players have decent stamina, so as someone like Gabriel Azuz, he has 90 stamina, it's actually nice to tell your players to come back in defense, right? Come back in defense, but also tell them to get in behind, right? So you want to be able to attack really nicely on the sides, but this is basically him going back and forth all the time, right? He's going to always move around the pitch depending on the instructions that you have. So remember that the instructions and the tactics that you have will influence how much stamina your player actually loses in game. So the most ideal work rates for me on the left mid and right mid position is high for me personally, but a lot of people use high medium. They love using the Gareth Bales, the Messis, and all that stuff, and they do a really good job at using those cards in those positions, right? But the reason why I would love to have someone like Ruud Gullit on the right mid side is that he actually has defensive stats and attacking stats. It's actually really interesting because you can try using Ryan Sessegnon and Jordi Alba's special versions of his card, because they're attacking players with defensive stats. So it's definitely worth looking into those cards if you guys haven't already. But last but not least, we have the strikers. So these strikers, best work rates, high medium is probably the best one. High low is probably the second best one. And then you got like the mediums and the medium lows, right? So those work rates are really good. Again, really depends on the instructions and the attacks that you have. With someone like Kluivert, because he's more of a big dude that's kind of like a target man striker, you would have to look at the traits that he actually has on his card. So if we look at the traits that someone like Kluivert has, not loading up for me right now. There we go. So if we look at Kluivert's 86 version of his card, his traits are flair, chip shot, and backs into player. So because he has backs into player as a trait, it's actually ideal to use him as a target man and laying off the ball to the sides as your left mid and right mids are making those runs in behind, depending on the support runs that you have. So that's going to conclude the video for today, though, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy the video, please drop a thumbs up on it. It definitely helps out the stream and the channel in general. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.